Hello everyone, today we're going to be continuing the reading of Maryellen Larkin's first book called The One and Only by Valerie Tripp. Chapter 7, Tickled Pink. As she rode her bike to school, Maryellen tried to follow Mom's advice and forget about her hair and concentrate on her skirt. The skirt certainly was wonderful. It poofed out a bit, very gracefully, as she pedaled her bike. If anything could salvage this day, the black and pink poodle skirt could. She hoped that everyone would be so dazzled by her skirt that they wouldn't notice her hair. When she got to the school playground, where the students were milling around before lining up to go into the school building, Maryellen parked her bike and looked for Davy so that she could apologize to him. Her heart sank when she saw that Davy was shooting baskets with Wayne. Nevertheless, she squared her shoulders and made herself march towards. "Hey, Ellie!" a voice shouted. "We're over here." Maryellen turned and saw Karen King waving wildly amid the throng of students. She waved back and ran to join Karen and Karen, thinking that really it would be better to apologize to Davy later, when he was alone. Halfway to the Karens, Maryellen stopped short. She blinked. Karen Stolman was wearing a black and pink poodle skirt exactly like hers. "Surprise!" the Karen sang out. Karen Stolman twirled, lifting her arms over her head like a ballerina. She was wearing a white blouse and saddle shoes, too. "Look," gushed Karen King. "Yesterday, Karen went out and got a poodle skirt just like yours." "We're twins, Ellie," Karen Stolman said gaily. "My mother and I went shopping at O'Neill's yesterday and—" She stopped. "Gosh, Ellie, you cut your hair." "Whoa, I'll say," said Karen King. "Bangs. Wow, aren't they kind of too short?" "Yes," said Maryellen sharply. She turned to Karen Stolman, eager to get off the subject. "So, you got your skirt yesterday?" "Yes," said Karen Stolman, "to match yours. Isn't this the best surprise ever?" Said Maryellen. She smiled because she knew the Karens expected her to smile. They expected her to be delighted, to be tickled pink, and she herself thought she would be. But her smile was crooked and forced. She couldn't help noticing that Karen's ponytail was longer than hers, and of course, Karen didn't have ridiculous bristle bangs like her unfortunate ones. Furthermore, Karen's skirt was much fuller than her own. Carolyn's crinoline had been laundered so many times that it had lost some of its oomph, so Maryellen's poodle looked disappointingly limp next to Karen's. In her heart of hearts, Maryellen had wanted to be unique. She had wanted to stand out as the one and only girl in the 4th grade who looked like a movie star. Now, she couldn't. In fact, Karen looked more stylish and movie starish than she did. "Karen Stolman has stolen my idea," Maryellen thought. "She's a copycat." "Patty Zender has the same skirt too," said Karen King. "You're kidding," said Maryellen. For some reason, it made her feel a lot better to know about Patty Zender. "So I wouldn't have been the only one in a poodle skirt anyway," she realized. "I wouldn't have been unique even if Karen Stolman hadn't copied me." The idea of the 3 matching poodle skirts on the playground cheered Maryellen up. "Well, we might as well make the best of it," she thought as she waved Patty over to join them. "Come on, Karen," she said. "The 3 of us can pretend we're the McDougal sisters." Maryellen held her hand up to her mouth as if it was a microphone, and she was on TV. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "we're everyone's favorite trio, the McDougal sisters, and we're going to sing for you our big hit of 1954, Time to Go." Karen Stolman and Patty giggled, but they sang along with Maryellen. "Time to go, oh, it's time to go." They copied Maryellen and put their hands on their hips and swayed from side to side When Karen King sang the doot, doodle-doo, doots in the background, they twirled around and made their skirts flare out. And at the end of the song, they sank down and curtsied, all at the same time. It turned out to be quite fun to be part of the Poodle Skirt Trio. Singing and dancing helped Maryellen forget about her terrible bangs and the misunderstanding with Davy. She tucked her disappointment and her annoyance at Karen Stolman away, deep down in a hidden corner of her heart, and sang almost as if she truly were tickled pink. Pretty soon the school bell clanged, and it really was time to go. Or at least time to line up. Boys in one line, girls in another. The two Karens, Patty and Maryellen, went upstairs to Mrs. Humphrey's 4th grade classroom together, feeling grown up and superior to the 3rd graders, who were still on the 1st floor with the other lower grades. Maryellen's saddle shoes squeezed her toes uncomfortably and went tisk, tisk, tisk as she climbed the stairs. It was as if they were scolding her for making the mistake of wearing them, even though they were definitely too small. "Welcome, 4th graders," said Mrs. Humphrey as the students entered the room. "Please be seated. Take any desk." Maryellen sank gratefully into a seat and banged her heels softly on the floor to make space for her toes inside her shoes. The felt poodle skirt was actually too hot for this sunny September morning, and Carolyn's crinoline itched under her armpits. She wriggled and scratched as inconspicuously as she could. "Fleas, partner?" Davy asked sympathetically from his temporary seat behind her. "On loan from Scooter?" Maryellen knew that Davy was only joking with her in a friendly way. Even so, she felt a tiny prick of annoyance. And then Wayne next to Davy snickered. "Ooh, ooh, ooh, ah, ah, ah." Wayne chirruped like a monkey. When Maryellen turned around to face the boys, Wayne was scratching his head and his armpits, pretending to be a monkey scratching its fleas. Suddenly, he stopped mid-scratch and stared. "Yikes," he said. "What happened to you, Baldy?" He put his hand flat on top of his head and wiggled his stiff fingers over his forehead. "Holy cow," breathed Davy, his eyes wide at the sight of Maryellen's sticky-out bangs. Snorted Maryellen, turning away to hide how hurt she was. She had expected teasing from Wayne, but not from Davy. Up till now, Davy had always made her feel better about things, not worse. She decided that she wasn't going to apologize to him for what Carolyn had done, so there. Maryellen turned her attention to Mrs. Humphrey, who was pleasantly plump and good-natured looking, and who smiled and nodded at the students as they entered. After everyone was seated, Mrs. Humphrey said, "Now that we're all here, I'll call the roll and assign permanent seats alphabetically." Since Maryellen's last name began with L, which was right in the middle of the alphabet, she knew that she had a little time to look around. She was glad to see lots of maps in the classroom rolled up like window shades above the blackboard, because she loved thinking about other countries and far-off places and different languages. She was not so glad to see above the blackboard green placards with models of uppercase and lowercase letters in white script swooping along white handwriting lines. Handwriting was not her best subject. She recognized all of the kids except one new girl who had long, dark braids, and Maryellen saw with amazement pierced ears. Talk about grown up. "Larkin, Maryellen," Mrs. Humphrey called. "Present," said Maryellen. She stood up, keeping her arms tightly close to her sides so that Carolyn's crinoline wouldn't slip. Mrs. Humphrey beamed at Maryellen and looked very pleased as she pointed to the desk she wanted her to take. "I could have guessed that you were a Larkin," she said. "You and your sisters, Joanne and Carolyn, are as alike as 3 peas in a pod. I'd recognize that Larkin nose anywhere. I had your sister Carolyn in my class a few years ago, and Joanne a few years before that. They were excellent students." "Yes, Mrs. Humphrey," said Maryellen, thinking, I'm off to a good start. Mrs. Humphrey likes me already. She slid into the chair at her assigned desk, which was behind Jimmy Lansing, as usual. After 3 years behind Jimmy Lansing, she was getting to know the spindly back of his neck very well. I'll bet you're as tidy and organized as Carolyn and Joanne were, too, said Mrs. Humphrey. Maryellen's smile faded a bit. Uh-oh, she thought. Mrs. Humphrey would soon figure out that she was not tidy or organized. Then again, Mrs. Humphrey would also soon figure out that she wasn't Carolyn or Joanne. The funny thing was, Mrs. Humphrey didn't seem to figure that out. As the morning progressed, pretty soon, everyone in the class knew that when Mrs. Humphrey said Carolyn, she meant Maryellen. It was confusing. During math class, whenever Mrs. Humphrey said, "Tell us how to divide these numbers, Karen King, Karen Stolman, and Carol Turner all looked up, expecting to be called on. After a while, Maryellen looked up too, because often Mrs. Humphrey was looking straight at her and calling her Carolyn. If that happened, and Maryellen didn't look up, Wayne took it upon himself to lean across the aisle and poke her hard in the ribs and hiss, "She means you." To add to the confusion, when Mrs. Humphrey said Joanne, everyone, including Maryellen, naturally thought she was calling on Joanne Martin, who sat right behind Maryellen. But sometimes Mrs. Humphrey was looking at Maryellen and calling her Joanne. When that happened, both Maryellen and Joanne Martin would answer Mrs. Humphrey at the same time. Maryellen couldn't help noticing that Mrs. Humphrey was starting to get flustered and looking annoyed every time she called her by the wrong name. Whether she responded or not, it was almost as if Mrs. Humphrey suspected Maryellen of trying to trick her deliberately. This is what happens, thought Maryellen, when even your teacher is a hand-me-down from your sisters. At lunch, Karen King said to Maryellen, "Mrs. Humphrey seems to think that your name is Maryellen." Maryellen grinned. Quickly, she drew a sketch on her napkin of a frowning Mrs. Humphrey, saying, "Carolyn, Joanne, Maryellen, whoever," and pointing her finger like Uncle Sam in a recruitment poster. Under the drawing, she wrote in capital letters, "This means you." All the girls giggled. Davy, who was passing their table, asked, "What's so funny?" Wayne, who was right behind Davy, snatched the napkin out of Maryellen's hand. "Get a load of this," he crowed. "A cartoon of Mrs. Humphrey." "Give it back," Maryellen demanded, twisting in her seat. But Wayne waved the napkin over Maryellen's head, just out of reach. "You can't make me," he taunted. "Got it," shouted Davy, snatching the napkin out of Wayne's hand. Just then, someone took the napkin out of Davy's hand. "Hey," he began to protest, until he saw that it was Mrs. Humphrey. "Uh-oh," breathed Karen King. "I am disappointed in you children," said Mrs. Humphrey, "fighting over a napkin. Is this the proper way for fourth graders to behave in the lunchroom?" "No, Mrs. Humphrey," said Davy, Maryellen, and the two Karens. Wayne had somehow disappeared, slithering away in the luncheon-room crowd like a snake. Maryellen got very red in the face, while Mrs. Humphrey looked at the drawing on the napkin. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Humphrey," she began. "Why, I'm surprised at you, Oh, Miss Larkin," interrupted Mrs. Humphrey. She held the napkin with the very tips of her fingers as if it were radioactive, tore the napkin in half, dropped the two pieces in the trash, and left. "Davy, look what you did," said Maryellen crossly. "What do you mean?" asked Davy. "I took the napkin away from Wayne to give it back to you." "Well, if you hadn't been yelling and waving it around, Mrs. Humphrey wouldn't have noticed it," said Maryellen. "You got me into trouble." "You got yourself into trouble," said Davy, "by drawing the cartoon in the first place." Maryellen started to say. "Never mind," said Davy. "I'll get lost. That's what you want me to do, right? Just like this morning?" He turned on his heels and stormed off. "Yikes," said Karen King softly. "He's mad." "Well, I'm mad too," said Maryellen. "Now Mrs. Humphrey doesn't like me, and it's Davy's fault." "I told you boys were pains," said Karen Stolman. "I think it's Wayne who's the pain," said Karen King. "He stuck himself onto Davy like glue." "Well, Davy should unstick himself," said Maryellen crossly. "Why does he put up with Wayne anyway? I don't like him." "And I don't think Mrs. Humphrey liked your cartoon, Ellie," said Karen King, who prided herself on telling the truth no matter how unpleasant it might be. "I never meant for her to see it," said Maryellen miserably. "She may not be sure who I am, but now she is sure that she doesn't like me." "Well, we still like you, Care Joe no. Oh, Miss Larkin," said Karen King kindly. "Thanks," said Maryellen. Her smile was weak but grateful. What would she ever do without the Karens, her two best friends, especially now, when, for the first time ever, she and Davy were on the outs? That afternoon, when Maryellen was back at home changing into her play clothes, Joanne asked, "So, how was the first day of 4th grade?" "Fine," sighed Maryellen, sounding as if she meant the opposite. "Mrs. Humphrey is nice, isn't she?" said Carolyn. "I guess so," said Maryellen gloomily. She patted Scooter in a distracted way. "You don't sound very enthusiastic," said Joanne. "What happened?" "Mrs. Humphrey kept calling me Joanne or Carolyn," Maryellen grumbled. "And I drew a cartoon about it, and she saw it." "Uh-oh," said Carolyn. "I didn't mean to be disrespectful," said Maryellen. "Really, I didn't. I was just sort of making a joke about how she didn't seem to know that I was me." "Did you tell Mrs. Humphrey that you were sorry?" asked Joanne. "Yes," said Maryellen, "and I really am sorry." "Mrs. Humphrey will forgive you," said Joanne. "She knows that it's what you do after you've made a mistake that matters. Anyway, everyone makes mistakes." "Yes," Carolyn interjected brightly, "like your bangs." "Oh," moaned Maryellen, not at all cheered up. "Mrs. Humphrey never would have seen the cartoon if Wayne hadn't snatched it and Davy hadn't waved it around." "What did I tell you?" said Joanne. "You cannot be friends with boys in the 4th grade. They're—" "Pains?" suggested Maryellen, remembering what Karen Stolman had said about her brother. "Yes, for a while," said Joanne. "They're okay again in high school." Maryellen knew that, of course, Joanne was thinking of dreamy Jerry, to whom she was practically engaged. "But right now, Ellie Melly, if you're smart, you'll concentrate on your friendship with the Karens." "Right," said Carolyn. "Girls won't let you down." Maryellen hoped that Carolyn was right, and that Joanne was wrong. She really didn't want to have to wait until high school to be friends with Davy again. In her heart of hearts, she was sorry about their fight, and she already missed him. Aww. So that was Maryellen's first day of 4th grade. I think it did not go as she planned. So hopefully she has a better second day of school and 3rd and 4th and for the rest of the year. Hopefully she'll wear the poodle skirt again maybe and have better luck too. Hopefully that's not the only time she wears it in this book. So anyways, that is the end of chapter 7. Make sure to stay tuned for chapter 8. If you enjoyed this chapter, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Also subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and let me know what you think of Maryellen's poodle skirt. Was it the right outfit to wear for the first day of 4th grade? Thanks for watching. See you soon.